Welcome to another edition of That Time When. Matt Miller with you. This is the podcast series where I take you through the archive of Trekzone, diving into things that you might have missed if you're new to the channel, or maybe you can catch up on again. At the end of this podcast, I will have a link to the full-length edition of the podcast, so click on that to keep listening in to this interview. This is That Time When Professor Tamara Davis and I sat down at the University of Queensland and we talked about gravitational waves.
This is Trekzone's That Time When.
Professor Davis, welcome to Trekzone. Welcome back to Trekzone.
Thanks so much. It's great to be back.
Now, last year we talked about gravitational waves, and they've been making headlines on Sister Show Talk and Science in the past few months. Can you refresh the audience on what they are?
Yep, sure. Gravitational waves are one of the most exciting discoveries in physics in the last few years. They were predicted way back 100 years ago by Einstein when he was coming up with relativity, our theory of gravity. And what they are is actually ripples in space itself. We know that gravity sort of travels at the speed of light. So the signal from gravity telling you to fall travels at the speed of light.
Right.
So if you have something that's moving, like imagine two black holes orbiting each other, two things with very, very strong gravity, and their positions are changing, you get these ripples of gravity propagating outwards at the speed of light. And those ripples are the gravitational waves that we can detect on Earth now. And the way that you detect them is that as they travel, they stretch and squish the things that they pass through. So they're actually stretching and squishing the Earth sort of in an oscillatory way as they pass through.
Well, when we spoke to you last year, we were out by the lake here at UQ, and we used the analogy of a rock or a stone dropping into the lake and causing the ripples across the water. It's a little bit similar to that in a much simpler sense, isn't it?
Yeah. So I guess if you dropped a rock in, you can see those waves propagating in circles outwards from where the rock dropped down, and it's quite similar for the gravitational waves. If there's two inspiraling black holes, it sort of goes out in a bit of a spiral pattern, but very much like a sort of those circular waves around the rocks. And gravitational waves are created by heaps of things. Basically, any time you have a couple of things that have gravity that move, like if you and I wave our arms around here, we'll cause gravitational waves, even though those are way too tiny to detect. Really, the whole universe has this sort of background of gravitational waves rippling through it. And so it's like maybe throwing many rocks in the pond. And the ones that we can detect now is when you actually get a boulder and hurl that into the pond, we can detect the really, really big ones from things like two black holes colliding. We can't detect all the black background of little tiny ones, only the really, really big events.
Well, I can imagine that the LIGO observatory is ultra sensitive to pick things up so far away. So you talk about waving arms. Can the scientists sort of calibrate the machines over there by waving their arms in front of it, or does that disturb the readings?
The precision with which they have to measure is ridiculously high because the effect of gravitational waves is so small. Part of the reason of that is basically space is really stiff. It's really hard to make it bend. And so you need even something as strong as a couple of black holes colliding doesn't actually change the distances very much. So the way LIGO works is they've got two arms where they shoot a laser down a tunnel. It reflects off a mirror at the end and comes back. And then at 90 degrees, another laser goes off in the other direction and comes back. And when they recombine the light, if there's any change in length of one arm compared to the other, they can notice that in the signal that comes out the end.
Okay.
But each tunnel is 4 kilometers long, and they have to be able to tell a change in distance that's smaller than the nucleus of an atom.
Wow.
So, I mean, how can you even, the mirrors are made of atoms, right? How can you possibly measure a distance that's accurate to smaller than what your mirror is made of? And I guess it's because you can think of it, the mirror is made of many, many, many atoms, and averaging over things, you can get more precision than you could with a single one. But it's very difficult to conceptualize just how accurate that has to be. It's some people, the other analogy is if you go to it's measuring the distance to our nearest star to the accuracy of a human hair.
That's incredible. And through all of that, I've heard stories that apparently LIGO can pick up the cows in the next field. Is that an urban myth?
I'm not sure. I mean, they definitely detect things like trucks rumbling many kilometres away. Any small environmental change they notice because they're measuring. They can't shake. The mirrors can't shake. Otherwise, you get too much noise. And the whole challenge of getting the LIGO to work was to make the noise as low as possible. So get rid of those cows.